All right, welcome back to our series on precise 3D design with Adobe Illustrator. This is the fourth video. So we've set up our workspace, we've set up our document, and then in the third video, we looked at something really simple. We just sort of drew out a quick phone stand, and we were able to make just a really simple design based on some pre-measured dimensions. Today, we're going to look at something a little more complex, and you can see I've sort of got the final result actually here to show you. We're going to create a little bit of like a barrel jack that you might use to connect two parts together that are 3D printed or manufactured. And we're going to look at some of the tools that allow us to create this pretty quickly. So let's jump right in, and I'll just sort of walk you through the process of this. Now, I'm not really starting with any big dimensional needs. I've sort of, eyeballed my ruler, and I've sort of figured out how big I want these to be. I'm going to start out with a rectangle that's 15 millimeters wide by 4 millimeters tall. And then, so that's sort of the size that I want for one of these legs. And then I'm going to drag this down. I'm actually going to make sure that snap to grid is turned on so that I get some nice dimensions going on here. And I'm going to pull this down we've got our grid that each square is 1 millimeter square. So we've got this 2 millimeters apart from each other. So we've got both of these together. And then I'm going to hit P and go to my pen tool. And I'm going to just draw out a triangle that is about 3 millimeters tall from the top of the rectangle. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball this. It might not look even as exact as the original piece that I did. So there we go. Now these things, I didn't have snapping turned on when I created this, and so these things aren't exactly aligned. We can highlight both of these, and we can come up here to the align, or over to the right I've got the align panel, and we can vertical align bottom both of these. So now they're nice and flush with each other. Now I'm going to grab this triangle. I'm going to hold Alt and Shift, and I'm going to drag it down, and that's going to duplicate it. And then I want to flip it, so I can go to Transform, Reflect, and I want a horizontal reflection. We can preview that, what that's going to look like. We'll say OK, and then I'll just drag this back down again. And because I've got snapping on, this is going to align just perfectly. So you can see I've got the beginning shape of this barrel, but a couple more things to do. So I want to sort of make a base for this. And so I can drag out a rectangle, and I might want something like, 4 millimeters there wide. And maybe if I wanted a little stronger, maybe 5 millimeters. So we've got this nice piece here. And then if I switch to outline mode with Command Y, or that's view, this preview versus view outline, you can see all of my shapes are still separate things, even though in the preview mode it looks like one thing. They're all separate. So what I might want to do is I might want to actually combine these together. I might want to make this one shape because I don't really have any need to keep these separated. And so that's where this shape builder tool comes in. So this is mapped to Shift M. And so what I'm going to do is use my selection tool. I'm going to select all these pieces that I want to combine, and I'm going to hit Shift M, and now I've got my shape builder tool. And I can hold Shift and drag, and I'll select everything here, and it's just going to combine it all. Now there's another way we can do this, and I've touched on it before, is that the shape builder tool works very similarly to the Pathfinder tools. So I can undo what I just did, and instead of using the shape builder in this case, since I want to combine everything together, you can just use the Pathfinder Unite. And so clicking that will do pretty much the same thing that the shape builder tool did. Okay, so that looks pretty good. The next thing that I want to do is, if you see here in the finished product, because we may be 3D printing these parts, we often want to allow tolerances between our parts. So, you can't just make lines sort of connect right up to each other, because there's going to be a little bit of variation between things, and you want this to be able to sort of slide in and, not be completely loose, but also not be unable to slide in at all. So we've created a little tolerance here. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take this shape now, and why don't we go ahead and put a little bit of rounding. We'll grab our smart corners and we'll round them out just a little bit here. And then I'm going to hold Alt and, hold Alt, get my direct select tool, hold Alt or Option, and drag it down. So now I've got a duplicate copy of this. I'm going to grab my pen tool again, and I'm going to draw a line that sort of connects or fills in this void that's here in the center. And the reason I'm going to do that is now I'm going to select everything. I'm going to go back to my shape builder, so Shift M to grab my shape builder, and I'm going to combine all of these pieces together now to sort of get this outline of the entire shape. So now I don't have that space in there. You can see there's the space here, but there's no space here. And then I can use my offset path tool. We looked at that in the last video. It's probably the #1 tool that you'll end up using to create things like tolerances or gaps between parts or making parts fit together. So with this path selected, I can hit offset path over here, or like I explained before, I've mapped it to a keyboard command. Command Option Shift O will give me my offset path. I can preview what it's going to look like, right? We can change how big we want the offset to be. We can go into negative numbers to actually move it inward, but in this case we want it to go outward, and we really just want a tolerance that is going to be good enough to make things fit together. So I'm going to do about a 0.6 millimeter offset, and we'll say okay, and that'll create a brand new path up here. And that's all we needed that extra part for. As I drag it up here, and I can't get it to align quite right because I've got snapping turned on, so I'm going to turn off my snap to grid. And I'm going to select both these parts, and I'm going to align them using this vertical align center. And so now they're nicely, perfectly aligned with each other. I might turn snapping back on in case I need it. I can get rid of this part here. We're done with that. We just wanted to create this offset. Okay, and so now I can sort of create the part around the offset by just taking sort of a rectangle, or the rectangle tool, and drawing out just a little piece like this. And so if we go back to preview mode, it doesn't look like much, and that's why we often will stay in the outline mode in order to see what's going on with all of these shapes. So now I'm going to select this square that I just drew. I'm going to select the offset path. I'm not going to select the inner tool. We don't want to do anything with that. We're pretty much done with that barrel piece. And now I want to go back to my shape builder, and I want to hold Alt. And because these two pieces are selected, the barrel itself, the first piece that we created, is not part of this selection. It's just these two pieces. So I'm not doing anything to interfere with that. I'm just looking at what can be combined or subtracted between this rectangle and the offset path that we have selected. So now I'm going to go ahead and hold Alt, and that'll actually delete this path from the square. And we can get rid of that. Oops. We can also delete this one here. And now we've got sort of that piece that can surround the barrel, and it's got the offset tolerance built into it. We can just add a little bit of a fillet to this piece so that it'll slide in a little better. And that's pretty much it. Now, when we're creating this infusion, we actually want to revolve this piece. We want to make it so that the piece is actually circular. And so one thing that's going to help us do that is drawing a line down the center of it. Now I'm a little bit off from my line because everything everything was shifted when I tried to align the offset with it. So I'm just going to grab everything, and I'm going to vertical align center everything. So now everything is nicely aligned to each other. And so this line here is going to let me just grab half of everything and allow me to do a revolve. So that's pretty much it. I can go ahead and export this. I'll say export as. I've got it all selected. I'll pull it back up here. We'll call it barrel connector. And we're going to save it as a DXF again. We're going to say export. We're going to change this from millimeters to inches. This is so we get the scale to come into Fusion correctly. 1 inch equals 1 unit. That's what we want. Export selected art only. We're good to go. We'll say OK. And then we'll move over to Fusion. And now we're in Fusion, and we can say insert DXF. We'll select our plane. We'll select the file, barrel connector. Okay, there it is. We'll say OK. Looks good. And then we can highlight these two items. We can create a revolve. So you can see, because we put that line through the middle, it's separating these pieces, which is exactly what we wanted. Because when we revolve, if we want to revolve a full 360, we only need half of the profile that we're going to revolve. We need to select an axis, which again, we can use this line that we created. So that's our axis that we're revolving around. Now by default here, we've got a 180-degree angle, so you can actually see underneath it what's going on with the part being created, and it looks pretty good. We've got our tolerance built in. That looks really nice. I'm going to go ahead and change this to 360. So we've got a full barrel in there, and we'll say OK. Then I can go ahead and just look at my bodies here. I can hide body 2 here. Now you can see what we might need here is we need a little bit of gap so that these prongs can actually flex when you slide them in. That's what's going to allow it to actually connect. So I'm just going to go and really quickly create another sketch here on the circle, and I'm going to grab my center rectangle tool. That gap that I had created was 2 millimeters, so I'm just going to make it 2 millimeters tall. And another one, grab our tool again, and another one that is 2 millimeters wide. And then I'll extrude that, hit E for extrude. Grab all of that. We're going to cut through. Now we don't want to cut through the whole thing. We want to leave this base connected. So what we can do for that is we can say start at an offset plane, and we'll say start 5 millimeters, actually negative 5 millimeters from where we're cutting through. And we'll say OK. And now that's going to allow these pieces to flex, right? So we probably want to print it sort of this way, upright, or in some orientation, actually probably sideways for strength. But that's going to allow it to flex. And if we bring back this barrel here, you can see it would fit inside of there. So that's it, a really simple barrel connector, but we saw how we use the shape builder tool and the Pathfinder tools inside of Illustrator, which can be really powerful in sort of building up complex pieces.